Hello, everybody. My name is Lana and I'm from Tell Me Baby. Thank you so much for joining us today on our first Facebook Live. Tonight, I'm here with Midwife Tyler, who is going to answer your questions. Hello, Tyler. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here tonight.
So we know that it's a very new and different situation for everybody right now, and that it's particularly challenging for those with young families or some of you that may be expecting. So hopefully with your help, Tyler, we'd love to try and put some of your concerns and minds at ease. So if you do have a question tonight, please leave it in the comments below and we'll try to get through as many as we can. But before we start with our audience questions, Tyler, what is the one thing that you want pregnant women to know right now?
I think that's a really good question. I think at the moment it is a crazy time. There is so much anxiety and sadness and hopelessness going around. I want mums to know that it is okay to grieve their expectations of what they had for their pregnancy and for their birth, whether it be attending classes, baby showers, catching up with friends and family. I think it's important to recognize that this is a valid loss and it is something that you have lost. I cannot highly recommend enough PANDA, which is Perinatal Anxiety and Depression Australia. They have a hotline. And I find in those moments where you're overwhelmed and you're really just feeling wrapped up in those emotions, that can be an amazing hotline to call and just have your experience validated and, stop that meltdown in its tracks. So I would start off by recommending that.
Mm-hmm.
I also want women to know that this is an incredible time to feel empowered, to feel capable. Yes, you may not be able to get this information given to you in the conventional ways, but it's a time to step up into your intuition as a mum and as a woman and seek out the information where possible.
Absolutely. That is such great advice. Thank you so much. So let's jump into it. So our first question is from Nicole. And she wants to know if it's safe to have her partner with her during labour, birth, and also recovery.
So what I would say is the general answer is yes, but there's a few things we need to consider. So currently in New South Wales, with everyone entering the hospitals, they will get screened. You'll get asked questions like, have you been overseas in the last 14 days? Have you been in contact with people overseas, in contact with people with respiratory symptoms and things like that. So as long as this is all fine and that your partner doesn't have symptoms, it's completely safe for them to be with you. But it's also important to keep in mind that whilst in the hospital, because you're going out into a public place, it's so important for your partner to continue practicing social distancing and hand hygiene to really avoid the spread completely.
That's some good news. So next we have a question from Rachel, and she says she's heard that women are being sent home as soon as possible after birth. Is that safe? And what advice do you have for looking after yourself when you're in isolation with your new bub?
So this is definitely something that is being encouraged, early discharge. We know that with things even like blood clots, pressure injuries and falls, the longer you spend in hospital, the more likely these things to happen to you, or you're likely to get an infection. But what I want to stress is that you will not be kicked out if you do not feel ready to go, if you do not feel safe, if you do not feel ready, you will not be kicked out of the hospital. It's important for you to feel confident before going home. So some things I would recommend prior to going home is making sure you ask lots of questions. If you're breastfeeding, making sure you have your latch, watched by a midwife, making sure you're confident with those baby skills. You have a bath watched if you're new at that, or a nappy, you watch someone watches you change a nappy so that when you go home, you don't feel completely out of your depths. In terms of looking after yourself in isolation, I would say it's very crucial to have a routine as much as you can at this stage, to do things daily, like, making sure you eat breakfast, whether, it's at 9 a.m. or 3 p.m. in the afternoon. It's keeping in contact, and it's really seeking out help when you need it, not being afraid to call hotlines and get in contact with services where required.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, I'm just keeping an eye on the questions coming through as well. So Laura has a question about getting ready for birth. So she says that she hasn't been able to go to any prenatal classes. How can I physically and mentally prepare for childbirth? And are there any good online resources that I can use?
I would say there is so much information out there, and of course it can be very, very overwhelming. But the best way to start off with is think about what information you might need. Do you know if you're only allowed one support person? Do you know what's the expected stay for a first-time mum? It's okay to take, you know, that into your own hands and call your hospital and ask these questions. They're used to fielding them all day, every day. So don't be afraid to call up and find out the unknown. The next thing I would say, physically especially, again, back onto that point of routine. When you're preparing for birth, it is, you know, a physically demanding activity. And so making sure that, you know, even though we're stuck in isolation, you're still trying to build up that strength and that endurance. Some things I can recommend is a website called Spinning Babies. It's completely free and it has daily exercises for you to do to help stretch those muscles and balance things out in preparation for birth. I would also recommend just having a little YouTube about yoga videos you can do and stretches that you can do. If you seek the information out, there's definitely a lot of things out there to prepare. Another thing I would talk about is mentally preparing. So there is an app, a free app called Mind the Bump by Beyond Blue. And this has some great mindfulness and meditation resources for you to really help you be able to let go and relax despite everything that's going on.
Mm-hmm.
There are also many online courses that you can do, things like hypnobirthing, hypnobaby, she births. There's a wide variety of programs already out there. So having a bit of research and seeing which one you think is going to suit you and your partner best can be great. Mm-hmm. Another thing I would mention in terms of breastfeeding is Global Health Media. They have incredible videos on breastfeeding, on latch, on expressing. And while you're at home, really getting your knowledge up on breastfeeding can really put you forward in the long run once you have bub. Another thing I can suggest is looking at your local hospital's fact sheets and websites that they may have available, because that information is going to be specific to your hospital. If your hospital doesn't seem to have one, I can recommend the Royal Women's website for fact sheets, as well as Westmead's Women and Newborns. They have some great fact sheets and really simple, basic to read information to really get you prepared and informed.
Amazing. That is so much help. I'm a big hypnobirthing fan myself because I was a hypnobirthing mama. So that is so much that everyone has that they can be able to sort of tap into. So thank you so much for sharing all of that knowledge. We had a couple of live questions come through that I think are quite relevant for right now. So Jody has asked us, is the glucose test an optional one? Do you know if this test has been cancelled due to COVID-19?
So we know that in pregnancy, 95% of women won't have diabetes. Whilst it is routine and it is recommended because of some of the impacts that can come from having gestational diabetes, it's certainly something that you can consider whether you want yourself. There are other testings that can give you an idea of your blood sugar levels throughout a 3-month period. What I would say is every hospital, again, is going to be different. So don't hesitate to give your hospital a call and ask them, you know, what's available, what are your options, choices and alternatives, and what they're currently implementing so that you can feel best informed.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so this next one has been asked by quite a few people. It's obviously a big worry for new parents that they want to know if it's safe for their baby's grandparents to visit or if they should be just self-isolating and just doing visits through the front window.
Yeah, so at this stage, I would recommend, you know, it's sort of at your own risk. In terms of, it's not actually risk to your newborn, to the newborn or yourself, it's more risk to the grandparents, because in having birth, you've entered a public place, you're automatically at a higher risk of being exposed to COVID-19, and you could give that to the grandparents. What I do want to say to reassure women is that out of the 12 women in New South Wales who were confirmed pregnant COVID cases, as well as 11 children, none of them have been admitted to hospital or ICU. So generally, if you're getting sick in pregnancy or if baby is, the outcomes are really good. Where the outcomes aren't so great, as we know, our aging population. So it's something you really want to sit with and consider. I know just recently restrictions are starting to ease up, but I would still err with caution, using your FaceTime, sending photos, and if you are going to do those visits, sort of do them in the front lawn, have that social distancing, use masks where possible, and really still take the situation quite seriously.
I guess it's probably a really great chance to allow mum and baby to just really have that special time to bond and really connect, isn't it?
Exactly. So knowing that those special moments of meeting the grandparents are still going to happen, and having to wait is going to make it that much more special.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so Kelsey has asked us a question about the post-birth period and wants to know, will MCH nurse appointments or midwife visits still be conducted at home after the delivery?
So again, this is another situation where it is varying state to state, hospital to hospital. Some hospitals are still doing home visits. Some child and family health centres are still doing home visits. But the alternative now is for the mums to come into the hospital again, say at day 4 for the weight, back at day 2 for the newborn screening test. So you're still going to have access to these services, but it might just be done in a bit of a different way.
Okay, good to know. So we've got a couple other live ones coming through. Are water births still going on as normal?
So this is a great question, and it's something that is still being considered. Water births for low risk women who are not exhibiting COVID symptoms are still going on. However, it is not currently recommended for those who are COVID positive, because they already have a temperature, and getting it in the bath, as we know, can raise our temperature. So that's sort of the situation as it is. But again, these situations are changing day to day. So
Yeah.
you really do need to get in contact with your specific hospital and see what they're recommending.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have a question from one of our Facebook users who says, I've had a preemie baby before. What happens if something doesn't go to plan with this birth and the baby has to go to the neonatal intensive care unit? Are there revised rules at the moment around parents visiting there at the moment?
So again, another one that is specific to hospital, to the hospital that you're at, but I can give sort of a general, some general information about that. Currently, parents are still completely able to visit their baby in the neonatal unit, and all measures are taken in place to continue that bonding to happen. And if for some reason mum isn't able to get to bub, they're doing sort of FaceTiming photos, things like that, to still keep that bonding happening. The things that are restricted now is siblings and grandparents, unfortunately, aren't allowed to come into the NICU unit. So again, that's a situation where it's just going to be mums and dads and babies bonding for now.
Okay, good to know. All right, so this is a good one. For pre-birth prep, can you recommend any techniques to help reduce my fear on the day?
I really think it's about putting fear into context. So generally, what we see on the media every day, what we're seeing on TV shows, what we're grown up in, is that birth is this terrifying, dramatic event. And it doesn't necessarily have to be that at all. Birth
No.
is 100% a mind game. So when I'm framing birth to women, one thing I love to say is it's like exercise. When you're doing a bicep curl or you're going for that long run, it's uncomfortable, it hurts, you don't want to really be doing it, but you know it's functional pain. You know it's going to result in something good. In the same way, your body is naturally going to put out those endorphins, the same way after exercising, the same way on a run, that makes you feel high and euphoric. And you want to trust that during birth, your body is going to do this for you. So starting to address those fears, write them down, and doing some research about it can be really, instrumental in reducing your fear on the day.
Yeah, absolutely. I can personally vouch for that.
Yeah.
So we've got one around birth specifically, in terms of, I've heard pain relief options such as pethidine and morphine crosses the placenta and can be absorbed by the baby. Is this true?
So currently pethidine is not widely used throughout hospitals, but morphine is something that is used. Morphine does have a 12 to 14-hour half-life, so can affect baby for that time. Generally, when you're in hospital, the midwife will evaluate whether morphine is an appropriate choice for you. If we believe that birth is imminent within 4 hours, we will tend not to use it, because babies can come out very sleepy and may just need that extra stimulation and a bit of oxygen to help them come to. It can also delay breastfeeding and things like that. What I would say is that morphine can be an amazing option for women who are in early labor and have been for a long time and just need that sleep and rest. But it's definitely something where you want to weigh up all the options and do your own research so that you can feel comfortable with whatever decision that you make.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have a couple other questions about birth specifically here. So one quite if instruments such as forceps and vacuum need to be used, what stages is this, and what are some of the circumstances that these need to be used in? Will you be cut if they use forceps?
Some great questions. So generally would say that instrumental birth is more common in first time labours and births, and that's because sometimes babies can have difficulty navigating the pelvis and coming down as they should. These are always used on a woman who is fully dilated, so nearly there, 10 centimetres, and generally the baby is quite lower, sort of in the pelvis. We generally do advise that an episiotomy, that cut, is performed with a vacuum and a forceps, because you are at a greater risk of a 3rd degree tear, and that's a tear that can go from the vagina to the anus. So by cutting, you offset the pressure, and therefore the healing process is a lot easier. The thing you need to know is that you can decline and you can say no to anything. You know, some people can have a vacuum birth and not tear at all, but it's about you doing your research and weighing up the risks either way. But generally when they're used is fetal distress. So if we can see when monitoring you that baby's really not happy, and we need to bring on baby, you know, imminently, the doctors will decide and make a plan that that's appropriate. Some other times is if, you know, maternal exhaustion, so if mum just can simply not push anymore but is nearly there, they will use it to guide baby out. And other, so they're or baby's not descending as baby should. They're generally the reasons that will give a bit of a helping hand.
Okay. A couple of other specific birth ones around, if the baby's in the wrong position, will they try and turn, or is that dependent on your obstetrician, and how do they turn the baby?
Yeah, so that's another great question. So by position, I'm going to assume you mean head down, because when babies are bottom down, that's a whole nother scenario. So I'll stick right now for head down. So previously I mentioned spinning babies, and this is a great website that actually teaches you to get baby in the right position. So where we often find that we run into some issues is that baby is posterior. So what baby's spine is on the maternal spine. So baby's sort of lying and looking upwards. And sometimes if they're born that way, we say like they're born sunny side up, looking at the world. So again, you need to discuss with your care provider what sort of knowledge and training and things they have, what are their recommendations. But I would say getting the baby in the right position starts in pregnancy, starts in stretching, in loosening those ligaments, in participating in some of those spinning baby exercises. But babies will ultimately turn on their own as well. So it is a bit of a mixed bag, but I think if that's something that is concerning you, there's definitely so many resources out there where there's things that you can do to help control that process.
Yeah, definitely a fan of spinning babies. I needed to do it myself. And just another one on birth. If you have an epidural, any tips for the pushing process as you can't feel it? Is it helpful to have a mirror to see how much you are progressing with your pushing?
This is a really great question. And so sometimes the midwife or obstetrician will offer to turn down the epidural during the pushing stage once you're fully dilated. So you can always opt for that. And it's not like suddenly the whole sensation is going to come back and you're going to be fully in labor. Sometimes you're just able to feel pressure and sensations a little bit more. So that's the first recommendation I would have, turning down that epidural. The second one would be that positioning is really important, and trying different positions to help baby navigate the pelvis. So depending on how dense your block is, you're even able to turn onto all fours, or what we call left lateral. You sort of lie on your side with the foot, with a leg in the air, and your partner can hold your leg up to help create that room. One thing you can also use is what we call a peanut ball. So before pushing, to help bring baby down. That's another thing to look at. But I think using a mirror can be super effective, and even starting to think about in your mind, you know, what does good pushing look like? We always say it is like, you know, doing a poo on the toilet, but I think when women are, you know, obviously have gone through labor, sometimes they sort of forget that. So starting to think about already what it might feel like to push, you know, if you're getting an epidural.
Yeah. Okay, great. So I think we're going to start to wrap it up because we're running out a little bit of time, but I've got a question here is, what do you, as a midwife, wish more people knew before the baby arrives?
I think it would be to sort of write down your expectations first, to really think about what you think birth's going to be like, what you think transition to parenthood is going to be like, and then researching those outcomes. I think what hurts most people is that they have this idea in their head about how things are going to go, and it's completely different, and that attachment really gets them down. So I think learning to go with the flow and sort of let go of the outcomes can be really important, but empowering yourself and taking it, you know, on yourself to seek this knowledge out, to feel like you know what's going to happen. There's nothing worse than, you know, going through the experience of birth, which can be so overwhelming, and not having an idea of what's happening to your body, what the different stages of labor look like, what's you know, what having a placenta, you know, what to do with the placenta, things like that. So the biggest thing that you can do is really inform yourself as much as possible prior to birth.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, well, I think that's all that we have time for tonight. We really hope that you have all been able to get some of the answers that you may have been looking for. Tyler, I want to thank you so much for joining us and sharing your wonderful wisdom with everybody. Before we do go, I just want to let everybody know that we do have a brand new Facebook group for pregnant women. So we'll put the links in the comments below. So make sure that you join us here so that you can chat to other mums to be and mums who are in the same position as you right now. We'd love to have you join us in there. So I just like to say thank you so much, Tyler, and we'll see everybody next time. Have a lovely night and stay safe.
One last thing I just wanted to add is it's important to see that there are positives to come out of this. I know it does feel all dark and gloomy, but the UK now has seen a rise in their breastfeeding rates because mums are allowed to be alone with their babies without having to worry about visitors, enjoying that baby moon period, you know, that bonding now that you can do guilt-free, not having to worry about catering to visitors. So it's really starting to see that there are some positives that are to come out of this, and it's important to try and stay positive.
Absolutely, taking that pressure off mum to be and just really enjoying that time. So thank you so much for your advice and everything tonight.
Thanks for having me.
And you're welcome. And we'll see everybody next time. Have a lovely night.
Bye.
Bye.